Just wanted to kind of give an overview, brief overview. As many of you know, and from the paper and so forth, we have started looking at the area of Hornellsville, Hartsville. We've also started looking in the Wayland-Cohocton area. And by looking, what I mean is we've started to contact landowners. We have started to make contracts and agreements with landowners in all three of those areas that I just mentioned. We have started to do some pre-environmental studies and some things that leading up to a full-blown analysis of the area for its viability for a wind farm. The process generally takes a couple of years before we kick off. Well, I guess it can depend. In Howard, for example, the project took about, well, we started talking to landowners in 2004, so it was a long process. The study portion of that normally takes a couple of years, and then the aggregating of that, and then the permitting process. Many of you are familiar with the permitting process, what you may have read or heard about from Howard and Cohocton. It's going to be a little different. Any new power projects built in the state of New York will no longer go through what used to be called the seeker process. It will now go through what is called Article 10. Article 10 is a power siting process, not for wind farms, but for every power project, whether it's a coal-fired power plant or a gas plant, those sorts of things. To be honest, we're still learning a lot about how that process is going to work. The PSC just started doing it. There is one project in Cape Vincent that's going under that review process. I don't know exactly where it is in the process. I imagine there'll be a few more power projects to go through Article 10. They're talking about doing some repowering of the Dunkirk coal facilities, and there's a lot of natural gas-fired power projects that are proposed. So you'll start to hear a little bit more about those siting and how things are done. For now, there's really not a lot to do from a permitting point of view. We're still kind of gauging landowner interest. There may be enough landowner interest in the town of Hornellsville to go to the next phase. There may not be. We've had some interest. We've had like I said, we've signed a few agreements. We've had some not interest. So I could be back here in 2 or 3 or 4 months saying, "Sorry, I wasted your time. We don't have the interest in a project." That's kind of where we are in the process. For those in the town, you're lucky enough, or for those of you that aren't happy that I'm here, unlucky enough that you can go down to Howard and take a look at the facilities there. You can also go up to Cohocton. Any project that's built will look largely like those. I can tell you that modern turbine technology is changing. The towers in Cohocton and the towers in Howard were both at 80 meters, so that's about hub height. It's about 240 feet. I can tell you that the newer towers are pretty standard at 100 meters, so about 330 feet, and the blade length is getting bigger as well. So, they generally are taller. Generally, they're bigger machines, although the ones in Cohocton are 2.5 megawatt machines, and for the most part, that's the industry is going to maybe a 2.5, 3.0 kind of megawatt machine, whereas maybe the project that was proposed here, I don't even know exactly the year that it was proposed, but those would have been with a 1.5 megawatt GE machine. So there is a little bit of difference in that. The same things hold true in Howard. We entered into a couple of agreements with the town. We entered into pre-construction. We entered into a road use agreement. The road use agreement required us to bond roads. We did a couple things. First of all, we did pre-construction surveys, so we did a videotaping of the roads. We did a post-construction road survey, so we did a videotaping of the roads afterwards. That included core samples, things like that. So that was included in our road use agreement with the town. We were required to upgrade some roads before we started construction. We were required to upgrade some roads post-construction. A couple of roads that come to mind is the Hughes Road. I don't know if you guys ever go over to Howard, but we completely upgraded the Hughes Road and did some work on some other roads. We also had a road use agreement with the county. So we did upgrade some parts and repair some parts of Turnpike Road, which is 109. We entered into a pilot agreement, a payment in lieu of taxes agreement. That's actually with Steuben County, IDA. That is a 20-year pilot payment. The rough amount is about $8,300 per megawatt. That project is a 55.35 megawatt project. Can't do the math in my head, but roughly it's a few $100,000 a year. That money is spread between the town of Howard, the school districts, and the county. Additionally, we also are required to pay a special use district tax. In Howard, the only special use district they have is a fire department tax. So we pay that yearly. I believe that amounts about $40,000 per year that we pay in school district tax, fire district tax, and that is over the length of the project. We do have a decommissioning fund in place. That has to run over the length of the project. We need to appear to the town board. I believe it's just the start of it. The first one is in 2 years, and then every 5 years afterwards, we need to present them with an independent engineering report that shows how much it will cost to decommission the turbines, in other words, take them down, and then if the cost of that exceeds what we have in the decommissioning fund, we must replenish that fund as it goes. To basically, we need to prove that we have enough money to take the turbines down if we needed to take them down. So we need to do that every year. Those are the agreements that are pretty standard, the road use agreements. I'm not sure, to be honest with you, if the county has completed their road upgrades. In the case of Steuben County, in the case of Howard, we did some of the road work. In the case of Steuben County, we actually just paid them for the road work, and then they completed the road work. They wanted to do it themselves up to their specs. We have, I would say the process would be easily 2 or 3 years before I would say 2 years before we started formal permitting process. At that time, you would learn, there would be public meetings, people from the Public Service Commission would come in, they'd give town presentations, they would go through. It will look a lot like the secret process, and many of the studies will be the same as the secret process. The difference will be, instead of a lead agent being the town or the planning board, in this case the lead agent would be the Public Service Commission, and they would govern that process. Trying to think of other things. I mean, obviously we have a project here close. Everpower has 6 operating wind farms. We have about 512 megawatts in operation. We have 1 project in California. We have 4 projects in Pennsylvania, and we have this project in Howard, New York. So we have about 53, I think, employees now. Our headquarters is in Pittsburgh. It used to be in New York City, but it's now in Pittsburgh. And we still maintain an office in New York City, so a small satellite office. Trying to think of anything else, Ken, is there anything else that I can go over? Everything is really very preliminary, but I wanted to start it off. I wanted to kind of, since we did have interest, since we do have some people that were interested and did sign some agreements with us, we wanted to come and just say hello, and if the board has questions or if people have questions, so I don't.
Yeah, we'll certainly allow questions. There's no problem. It's just, we just certainly don't want to get in a debate, because this is the first time we've seen the presentation of our board and our planning board. So.
Wayland Co-opted. But please, I'm sure there are questions, or maybe not.
Maybe you did real well.
I doubt that. I just, but I'm happy to.
I think you and I, and when Jim and I were meeting with you You did talk about the potential for Hornellsville being in the 25 to 30 megawatts.
I would say that you know, it would not be out of the question for there to be about 8 or 10 turbines in Hornellsville, and that would equate to about 30 megawatts of power, because given that by the time this project is ready to build, I would assume that the standard would be about a 3 megawatt turbine. So if you have about 10 turbines, you get about 30 megawatts. It's hard to say if you base that based on current pilot amount. You know, 30 megawatts, that would be about $240,000 that would be split amongst the taxing jurisdictions. So that would be the county, the schools, and the town. And then the same bonding requirements for road use agreements and all those things would still take place. That's going to be standard across all projects. It's a little hard to talk about the pilot and the financial considerations just because things could easily change over the years, but I'm assuming it'll be reasonably the same format.
On the other hand, what's our neighbor? How about Hartsville? Are they 50 megawatt? Or?
No, Hartsville I would think would be a little, maybe more like 15 turbines, maybe closer to 20. Again, the biggest thing now is that we've probably contracted with 25 landowners between those 4 towns. We would need to contract with easily 4 times that amount for there to really be something. And you know, we could, again, I can't stress enough, we could be in a town like Hartsville and we could have enough people say, I'm really just not interested. I'm just really not. I can tell you that our biggest kind of reaction or many landowners in that Wayland-Cohocton area have expressed interest. We've actually had people start calling us unsolicited. You know, I think that overall, I know they have some trouble with the turbines in Cohocton, but I think overall the project's worked okay, and I think it certainly. It's such a big project that I think the financial impact to the town of Cohocton has been pretty good, just based on that. So, but you know, I realize that any project that we introduce and any project that gets built, you know, there are people in Howard that I know are happy with it, and I'm sure I see some people here from Howard that I know aren't happy with it. You know, we're not naive enough to know that a project, a wind power project, it changes the town. And for many people, it changes the town forever. And for some people, it changes the town forever in a bad way. We recognize that. It's not something that we don't understand. But we also get a lot of positive benefits. And we get a lot of positive comments. You know, we have a lot of people calling us saying, look, we were worried and it's not that bad. You know, it didn't turn out to be that bad. And you can speak to, you know, I think, you know, go over, speak to some residents in Howard. You know, I'm sure living in the proximity, you can ask them. Ask people who have turbines and ask people who don't have turbines. And, you know, see the reaction. I'm quite certain that not everybody is in love with the project, but I think overall, I think people are pretty happy with it. And I think if you know, Ken, I know that Don Evia has offered this before. I'm sure he would come over and kind of give his opinion of how things went, and maybe even give some advice on how things went through the permitting process, that sort of things that maybe could have done better, differently, that sort of stuff. You know, their resources are there. I can arrange for town board members. I mean, you can drive over there, but we can also arrange for you to get a little more up close to the turbines if you wanted. And we can do that with the general public as well. There's nothing preventing us from doing that. We just need to schedule them. It's just a matter of when our operations guys have a little bit of time. We just did wind farm tours at the old Howard days. And we had a little bus and we brought people up. And the way I understand it, unfortunately, we didn't have enough time to give everybody tours that wanted to see them. So we'll have to get a bigger bus, I guess, next year. So, please.
The potential energy that these windmills would make, does it get just pumped back into the grid and go anywhere, or would it affect our local rates?
Yeah, you know, there actually was just a study done in Ohio that showed that the increase in wind power had a modest effect on wholesale power rates. And that didn't necessarily get translated into what you retail pay. But what happens is that project in Howard gets sold into the grid, and it's just part of the grid. There are some communities and some ways in which that power can be put to a certain entity. That's not the case in Howard. I believe there are a couple wind projects that do kind of sell directly to an entity, but mostly it just supplies New York State, and then that power is used by wherever. The way it works, electrons flow to the path of least resistance. So if Howard's, the turbines are running right now, these lights are probably being powered by Howard because it's the nearest source. Is generally how that works. So.
But it wouldn't necessarily affect the
no,
retail rates that we would see.
Unfortunately, it doesn't have an effect on. I think eventually, as we get our grid to be smarter and we get new technologies, solar, wind, maybe some increased hydro, that should have a stabilizing and even decreasing effect on power rates and the power rates that we see. Unfortunately, a project in this town probably isn't going to do much. As a total part of the solution, it could, but unfortunately, no. So. Can't have it.
What is the life expectancy of a turbine?
Yeah, there are turbines that run 25, 30 years. It's really difficult to say that in 10 or 15 years there couldn't be some great new technology that outweighs leaving those up there. And we may say, okay, let's just pull the tops off and put new turbines on the tops. I don't think that's likely to happen. I mean, there are plenty of people who have 20-year-old tractors and 20-year-old cars that just run and do it. Obviously, newer technology is going to be more efficient. So we expect the life to be 20 to 30 years, and then it's just a question of what is the cost benefit of the cost of removal and replacement versus just leaving them up and running. There are some projects in California that are just now being repowered that were built in the early 80s. And again, they work. They need a little more TLC, but they're running. It's just a question of it now. Do you just go ahead and replace those turbines with new equipment? And in California, in the Palm Springs area, that's what they're doing. They're doing a lot of what we call repowering. So.
Let's give Kevin a round of applause for coming.